Steve, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'll represent MDA today, even though there was a few different names on the agenda, and I believe I'm the first MDA rep of the presenters so far. So I appreciate the opportunity to give everyone an overview of some of the MDA programs as it relates to all of the work that we're doing to help meet our Chesapeake Bay restoration goals, greenhouse gas reduction act goals, and other things related to conservation. So I appreciate the opportunity again to give you an overview of the various programs that we have at MDA. It's going to be just high level, certainly. Hang on a second here. All of the information about our specific programs can be found on MDA's website. So that's mda.maryland.gov. And then over across the tab, there's a conservation tab there that really breaks out all of the different programs that we have. I'm going to talk specifically about conservation grants today and a few others like agricultural certainty and our nutrient trading program. I believe Adam Lyon is going to talk about our nutrient management regulations, which are a whole nother that's a whole nother conversation. And then Elizabeth Hoffman is going to talk about our watershed implementation plan. I think at the next meeting, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll hold off on some of that stuff and just focus on our bread and butter practices or programs that we have here at MDA. So the first one is the MAX program, the Maryland Agricultural Water Quality Cost Share Program. Everybody knows it as the MAX program. So this is, for those on the federal side, this is the rough equivalent to the EQIP program for the state program. It was established back in 1982 to help meet Chesapeake Bay restoration goals. So it's been around for quite some time. The goal of the program is to provide financial support to farmers, obviously, to install best management practices, to control or reduce pollution from agricultural land. And that's since expanded. Initially, it was focused on just nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment, but we do recognize that there are other resource concerns that could be addressed through the program. So the definition has expanded over the years. We do offer a pretty attractive cost share rate. So some of the practices we limit to 65% cost share, but in some cases we will pay up to 100% of the eligible cost for over. I think we're up to 42 practices total within the MAX program now. I think 25 or 26 of those are actually eligible for the 100% cost share. So we do have limits on a per project basis. So the limits are $50,000 per project. And then waste storage practices were limited to $200,000 for a waste storage practice. So if a farm has more than one practice but does not have waste storage, so if they're doing a bunch of in-field practices, their cap would be $150,000. And then if they do have ag waste, the total cap per farm would be $300,000. We have a variety of funding sources that we use. The primary funding source is there's state bonds that are issued annually, anywhere from $6 to $8 million a year. So all of that bond money that we use, we have to request approval from the Board of Public Works in order for a project to be approved. And the Board of Public Works consists of the governor, the comptroller, and the treasurer of the state of Maryland. So every project that comes in for max funding, we have to basically ask the Board of Public Works for their approval before we can move forward with funding a project. We do have some federal sources of money that we use. Some come from EPA, others come from USDA, but for the most part, again, we use state money to fund the MAX program. MAX projects on average are 10 to 15 years in length. So we have an agreement between the state of Maryland, the local conservation district office, and the farmer that basically outlines what's expected of each of those entities throughout the contract life of the project. Over the course of that project life, the practice is subject to a random spot check. So we randomly select a number of practices per county in a given year, and then we go out and spot check those to make sure that the project's being maintained, that it doesn't, there's no issues with repairs, or in the case of some of our structural practice, make sure they're not being abused or used for other things. We do have a technical advisory committee that meets annually to talk about the program and to recommend changes within the program. Most of the folks that serve on that advisory committee are from the local district offices, as well as our partners at NRCS and FSA and others. So that advisory committee helped drive the program, if you will. And then we also rely heavily on our state soil conservation committee and recommendations that they may provide regarding the program. And just here recently, a good example of that is that the state committee was concerned about the rising material costs, and many of the districts too, quite frankly, concerned about rising material costs related to COVID. So we put forth a proposal to the state committee to ask them if basically we could provide some temporary relief in our flat rate structure up to 30% over the cost of the flat rates that we have to address those rising material costs. So it's been a great partnership with all of the folks, within the state committee, but then also across the entire conservation partnership. So that's the MAX program in a nutshell. The other big hitter that we have at MDA is our Maryland cover crop program. Most of you are probably familiar with this. So we pay farmers to plant cover crops on their farms. And these are small grains that are planted in the fall following the harvest of corn or soybeans or other qualifying practices. So in many cases, we'll pay up, and it varies per year, anywhere from up to $85 or $90 per acre, depending on the requirements. So we have a base payment rate that's usually set around $30 to $40, somewhere in that range, and then additional incentive payments above and beyond that if the cover crops planted early, if it's if there's a delayed kill in the springtime. There's a number of different options that a farmer can choose from, and the payments are adjusted accordingly. We allow for the planting of the traditional small grain crops like rye, barley, wheat, but also allow for brassicas, legumes, and forage radish too, in mixes. So a huge, highly popular program. On average, we plant anywhere from 425 to 450,000 acres annually through the program. The program is funded through two different pots of money. It's about half of the money comes from a bay restoration fund, which for those that are familiar with this fund, we affectionately refer to it as the flush fee or the flush tax. So anyone that pays a wastewater bill or is on septic, they pay into this fund on an annual basis. So we get basically $11.5 million out of that, and then the other 11.5 comes from the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund, which is a separate pot of money. Part of that comes from car rental tax as well as some gas tax. So between those two pots, we have $23 million a year that we use towards the cover crop program. It's important to note that any of the seed that's purchased for cover crops, it has to be tested and labeled and follow all the seed laws and regulations that we have here in Maryland. The applicant must be in good standing with the MAX program and must be in compliance with our nutrient management program to be eligible. And then our conservation district folks go out and conduct field checks on a percentage of the fields annually to ensure compliance with the program. And over the past 2 years, what we've been doing with the cover crop program, specifically as it relates to this field verification, is we are working with USGS and USDA out at Beltsville and developing a tool using remote sensing techniques where we can actually use satellite imagery to do that analysis for us rather than having field folks go out and look at fields individually. We can look at snapshots over time to see fields as they are growing throughout the winter time and make a pretty accurate determination of whether or not there's adequate coverage for those cover crops. So we're leveraging new technology as best as we can as we move forward with this. But there is still obviously a large role for the districts to play in the cover crop program. We also have a manure transport program. So this program is designed to help animal producers that have high soil phosphorus levels or inadequate land to spread manure that's being generated from primarily poultry, but also dairy as well. So we'll pay up to $28 per ton to transport excess manure off of those farms onto other farms throughout the state that can utilize that manure, or we also transport that manure to alternative use facilities, such as growing of mushrooms or in the past, Purdue had a pelletizing plant where they were actually producing pellets and then shipping that out of the region. So there's a large interest and desire, especially in terms of the fertilizer prices this year. We think that the manure transport program is really going to take off again this spring when farmers want to get out and start spreading nutrients before planting. On the poultry side, the poultry companies themselves actually contribute 50% of the transportation costs. So we have agreements with each of those major poultry companies. So it's not only state money that's being used, but also individual poultry companies. The industry as a whole contributes to that. So you can see that's a typo. That should say FY 2020, not 2012. But we contributed about 1.3 million in state grants, and the poultry match was about $500,000. Transport over 300,000 tons of manure back in 2020, and we've just recently updated our annual report too. So, but I don't have those numbers, but it gives you an idea of how much manure we are actually transporting on an annual basis. And then finally, as part of that manure transport program, like I mentioned, the dairy farms, we do support the hauling of dairy manure as well. But in addition to that, we also pay for the injection of that dairy manure directly into the ground. So there might be some custom applicators that have that equipment. Farmers can take advantage of that. We'll pay up to $45 per acre to have manure directly injected into the ground as well. And I guess one thing I should note, if I scroll back real quick, you'll notice on the left-hand side, each of the programs. These are the brochures that are in the racks in each of the district offices. So just to kind of put it in perspective, each of the district offices should have these trifold brochures that you can give out to farmers, or you can learn more about the programs. The Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program is a partnership between both federal and state partners. Obviously, MDA, FSA, and NRCS are key to that, but also the Department of Natural Resources. So that program pays top dollar to take sensitive cropland out of production for 10 to 15 years, encourages the adoption of streamside buffers, wetlands, protects highly erodible land, and creates wildlife habitat. So there's I believe up to 5 different ways a farmer can get paid through the CREP program, and not only through the federal cost share that's available, but the state cost share. There's a practice incentive payment that contributes to this. There's annual rental rates or annual rental payments that go into this, and MDA also has incentive payments that go on top of this. And in the past, we've paid up to $250 an acre. That's just a flat out incentive to a farmer to plant any one of these or to implement any one of these practices. We just recently announced that we are now paying up to $1,000 per acre as an incentive. This is not cost share, but this is above and beyond cost share. Up to $1,000 per acre for riparian forest buffers as well. The statewide goal has been and will continue to be 100,000 acres. We have been falling short of that goal, but we continue to work together as a partnership to strive to meet that 100,000 acre goal. We also have another program called the Maryland Income Tax Subtraction Modification for Conservation Equipment. So this is not a cost share program, but this is actually a tax write-off for farmers that wish to buy certain pieces of conservation equipment to control soil erosion, manage nutrients, and protect the water quality in Maryland. So it allows all of those equipment purchases to be written off through a tax subtraction on Maryland taxes, not federal taxes, but Maryland taxes. So things like conservation tillage equipment, vertical tillage implements, manure spreaders, injectors, certain types of precision ag equipment, GPS, optical sensors, other things, all can be written off through a tax subtraction in Maryland. It's important to note that anything that is purchased has to be retained for 3 years following the tax year. Again, a great opportunity for farmers. It's not a cost share program, but still a financial incentive for them to implement these practices, or in this case, equipment. We also have a program. It's called the LILAC program. It's the low interest loans for agricultural conservation. So for farmers that wish to purchase some of that conservation equipment, or don't necessarily have the money up front to help with their cost in implementing conservation practices on the ground, the state offers a low interest loan that can be help provide farmers upfront funds to implement those practices. So again, those loans could help purchase types of equipment to control erosion, manure injection, new types of technologies for that may include nutrient management, global positioning systems, anything that's more precision ag related. These loans are guaranteed through the Water Quality Revolving Loan Fund that is maintained at the Department of the Environment. Typically, the loans are offered at 3 or 4% below the market rates. Farm Credit is a great institution. We've been working with them quite a bit. It's not a plug for them, but there are a few other lenders that are available that are participants in this. So if you have a farmer that's interested in the LILAC program, by all means, give them one of these brochures, have them contact us. We'll be happy to work through the process with them. We have another program. It's called the Maryland Agricultural Certainty Program. This program was developed back a few years ago, back in 2017, I believe. This program provides a 10-year exemption from any new environmental regulations that may come our way. So a farmer that may be interested in participating in this program is required to have an evaluation done on their farm. So we use a tool, an online tool, to help with that evaluation. And basically, the evaluation determines whether or not they've met their requirements in meeting the Chesapeake Bay restoration goals under our watershed implementation plan. So if this tool determines that the farm meets the requirements, they've done their part, they've done their fair share in cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay, then we can issue this 10-year exemption to them. So basically, if there's a new law or regulation that comes into effect that might affect the agricultural producers in Maryland, farmers that have signed up with the Certainty Program would be exempt from those new laws. The only exception to that is nutrient management. So if there are changes in nutrient management, that goes across the board. But if there are other things that come into place, the Certainty Program does provide some relief to those folks. We also have a nutrient trading program. So for farmers that are interested in doing stuff above and beyond their requirement to meet the local or to meet the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, they can sell the nutrients that are generated off of that farm for profit. There may be an entity that is interested in buying nitrogen or phosphorus to help meet the local permit needs or things of that sort. So farmers could work with an entity and sell the nitrogen or phosphorus credits that would be generated by implementing practices, and then receive compensation for that. It's a pretty complicated process. I'm not going to go into any detail of it today, other than to say that we do offer this program. If you work with ag producers that want to learn more about nutrient trading, by all means, we can help you with that. Feel free to reach out to our folks here at the state office at MDA, and we'll be happy to explain a lot of this in greater detail. But again, we do have a nutrient trading program that's available to farmers too. I'm just going to switch over to the soil health program. So this is a new program that came into existence as a result of a piece of legislation that was passed, I believe, 2 years ago now. It's a Maryland Soil Health Program. There's a Soil Health Advisory Committee that's been meeting over the course of the past year to look at various practices and provide recommendations back to MDA, specifically our Secretary of Ag, regarding the implementation of or incorporation of soil health principles and practices within our programs. So we are looking at additional opportunities, looking at new types of conservation practices that we can either fund directly through our MAX program, or look at alternative funding sources that specifically promote the healthy soils. We all recognize that a lot of the practices we're doing currently promote soil health, but if there are other new types of initiatives that we can look into, we are certainly exploring those options. So we do have a healthy soil program as well. And then finally, we've talked about Chesapeake Bay restoration, and like I said before, Elizabeth Hoffman's really going to go into a deep dive of that, I think, next time. So I won't mention it a whole lot, but there are other things besides bay restoration goals that MDA is tasked with, and one of those other things is this Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act plan that has been developed. So we're responsible for quantifying all of the metric tons of CO2 equivalent that's being sequestered on an annual basis through conservation practices. So we've put together a menu of recommended practices and what those carbon dioxide equivalent reduction values are, and then we're applying those towards our Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act. So this is yet another example of trying to capture all the co-benefits of conservation to satisfy all of the state's mandates. So I know I went through a lot of that very quickly. Here's my contact information. I'd be happy to address any questions that you guys have now, or feel free to reach out to me at any point in time, and be happy to talk to you about our programs. So with that, Steve, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Jason. Any questions for Jason? Good timing there. You finished with just 1 minute left. All right.
I'll have to talk slower next time. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Next.